All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today we're going to be breaking down Oklahoma and Texas rivalry renewed here in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl on Saturday. One of my favorite, actually my favorite rivalry in all of college football. Looking at a 3.5-point spread in favor of the 6th-ranked Sooners, over under 63.5. Since 2014, this game's been decided by one score in all but one game, and the one that wasn't was a 12-point game, so it was it was a pretty competitive one too. So this rivalry is always great to watch. Always a lot on the line for both teams, so it should be fun to see what happens here on Saturday. So jumping right into things, this Oklahoma offense, it's not really been great. Their offensive line has struggled immensely. They got 3 starters back from last year. Marquise Haynes, Eric Swinson, some of those guys. A new center in Andrew Ram. I thought they would be just fine. Ben Benderbaugh is one of the best offensive line coaches in college football. They've really struggled, though. Can't run the ball whatsoever, even with Kennedy Brooks and Eric Gray in the backfield. They finally got the run game going just a little bit against Kansas State. They were really good against Nebraska. But other than that, it's been pretty slow. Of course, they had a great game against an FCS school. That doesn't really count, though. Against West Virginia a few weeks ago, a good defense. They were phenomenal. The Mountaineers were phenomenal in slowing them down. They were not good whatsoever. The talent is clearly there, but running between the tackles, it's been a huge task, and one they've really not been able to take care of. You got it going a little bit against Kansas State, but not really sure if they can continue that trend. Spencer Rattler, he certainly hasn't lived up to the Heisman hype he was given to start the year, but people are making it out to seem like he's playing terrible, and he's not. He's not seeing the field entirely great. He's completing 76% of his passes, 10 scores, averaging 250 yards a game. He's been very efficient, over 70% completion rate in every single game this season. Yes, he's been a little inaccurate at times in forcing the ball. Should have more than 4 interceptions, but he doesn't. He's been solid. He hasn't been terrible like people think he has. He was very good in this game a year ago. Completed 88% on Saturday. I think that's the highest completion rate in school history in a single game. 22 of 25 on his balls, almost 250. He hasn't been terrible, though. As a distributor, though, again, they've been getting everybody involved. Mario Williams, the freshman, really stepping up. He's more of a slot guy. Mike Woods from Arkansas, the transfer. Marvin Mims, Jaden Hazelwood. You have 5 different guys who have double-digit receptions. Jeremiah Hall, he's been really good as well as an H-back type player. Offense has a lot of weapons. So what they need to do is they need to get them downfield. They need to take advantage of the zones. Rattler, he needs to see the field just a little bit better. He's been very efficient, though. Cut down on kind of some of the mistakes. He's still very young, but they have all the tools to be one of the nation's best offenses, like they always are. And they were pretty good in getting the offense going. The defense kind of struggled last week. We'll get into that later, but offense got going against Kansas State. They're held to under 400 yards. They had a handful of short fields, too. They were not on the field a lot. The 6.5 yards per play is the most they've had all year long. So they finally got the offense going, had some great balance. Hopefully that can translate over to Saturday for the Sooners to win this game. Looking at this Texas offense, it's been completely different with Casey Thompson under center. He was my projected starting quarterback for them coming into the year. They went with Hudson Card. He had a really good week 1, and then just kind of fell off after that. Didn't play a good game against Arkansas. Thompson's been the starting quarterback each of the past 2 weeks. 102 points the last 2 games against conference opponents combined. Thompson's playing great football. He didn't have a great game against TCU. He was kind of forcing it, wasn't exactly accurate. He makes plays with his legs, though, and he's got a strong arm. He's very composed in the pocket. He's plenty capable of making plays, as he did in the Alamo Bowl last year. That was his biggest moment, really, in his Texas career. His first implementation into the lineup in that second half, and he played a great ball game for them. So he's certainly capable of running this offense. It's really the running game, though, that speaks volumes for Texas. Averaging almost 270 yards a game. Bijan Robinson, Heisman campaign right now. He's fresh off a 200-yard game, a couple scores. He's got 650 yards, 7 scores on the year, averaging 6.2 yards per carry. He is my favorite back in football to watch. This guy's just incredibly slippery, could fit into any hole. Has great vision, too. Roschon Johnson, Keelan Robinson, these guys complement him very well also. Casey Thompson, he can do with his legs as an open field runner too. Really good running game for Texas. What will they do against this Oklahoma defensive front that's really good? Who knows? Offensive line's been playing very well. I think, having a talented back like Robinson gives you an edge in every single game. Arkansas garnered a lot of penetration on that game. They were able to slow them down for the most part. They didn't look terrible on the stat sheet running the ball, but when you're watching the game, they could not really get going the way they wanted to. It was just an all-around bad game. They haven't exactly played tough defenses since, really at all this year, other than the Arkansas game. So I'm not really sure what to expect from this Texas offense in this game. I think they're plenty capable of Steve Sarkisian as their play caller. You look outside, you got plenty of weapons who've stepped up. Joshua Moore has not been involved nearly enough. He's only averaging about 2 reps a game. They need to get him involved more. He's highly talented. It's been the young guys, Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington. Those are by far the top 2 receivers for Texas so far, both averaging over 15 yards per catch. They have combined for 7 touchdowns. These guys are really good. I expected Whittington to have a big season. Felt Worthy would get involved plenty some. But I didn't think these two would be the leading receivers by far. So they need to get Joshua Moore more involved. K. Brewer is a tight end. He's a good red zone threat. All around, though, this offense, they have nice balance. Casey Thompson can take advantage of some off-zone coverage. He has a good arm. I like what he's able to do in the pocket. So this is both teams have great offenses. I think they really like – I wouldn't say great, but good offenses. They like what they have coming into this game. That will continue to progress as the season goes on, though. This Oklahoma defense is really good, especially in the front 7. They're coming off a very sluggish game against Kansas State, which Skylar Thompson tore them apart. It was by far their worst game defensively all year. They were great against Nebraska at times, but overall in the trenches, that's where they make their money. They've yet to allow more than 101 rushing yards in a game. They're only averaging 2.7 yards per carry on the ground. The depth is phenomenal in this defensive line, though. Look at guys like Isaiah Thomas. You have Nick Bonito off the edge. It's been very good. Perion Winfrey, Isaiah Coe, Jalen Redmond, they have great depth on this defensive line. It was I feel like this was the best front 7, or at least the best defensive line that Lincoln Riley has had in his career at Oklahoma. They have great depth. But last week they got really torn up in the air, and they've really struggled this season in the secondary. A lot of miscommunication. Turner Yell, Pat Fields, it's a very veteran safety group, but the corner group is very young. Jaden Davis, Justin Broles, some of those guys are stepping up. DJ Graham as well. They've really struggled with communication, though. They've not been great at times. They have a tough task in front of them here. I feel like Texas is going to have a good amount of success throwing the ball. Would they have balance, though, like they want? Will they be able to run the ball? I'm not counting on it. I think this Oklahoma defensive front is going to be up for the challenge. I think they're going to be able to slow down Bijan Robinson just a little bit. But how will their secondary hold up is ultimately going to determine this game, because if they're getting beat downfield, it's going to open up things for a very slippery runner. Deuce Vaughn was able to get free in the passing game a couple times last week. He might have had a good carry or two, but for the most part, they slowed down that running game. Looking at this Longhorns defense, Pete Kwiatkowski in his first season, it's been a respectable unit, but really nothing too flashy. They got burned terribly on the ground against Arkansas. They got outmatched physically in that entire game, both sides of the ball. They've really struggled to defend the run. Last week you saw TCU and Zachary Evans have plenty of success. They held up well in the first game of the year against a really good offensive line, LA Lafayette. But other than that, it's been kind of shaky. Guys like Luke Brockmeyer have definitely stepped up at linebacker. Alfred Collins, Byron Murphy, some very young players, as expected. Everyone's kind of getting involved on this defensive front. It's coming into the year. I was excited to see some of these guys step in and see what they can do in this new defensive system. DeMarvion Overshawn, he's having a really good year as well. Their pass rush, though, was not phenomenal for Texas. Only averaging about 2 sacks a game. They're struggling to get into the backfield frequently. Penetration again against the run hasn't been phenomenal. This Texas defense kind of iffy coming into this game. Their offense has been able to outscore opponents so far, but if their offense wasn't clicking, I have serious doubts if this defense would be able to hold up. Their secondary, veteran unit, they blew out Texas Tech for what it's worth, but they still gave up 35 points and, almost 8 yards per play. They were getting burned there. Similar numbers against Arkansas too. They got absolutely throttled in that game, outmatched physically. Will they be up to the challenge to match Oklahoma's physicality? I think so, against, a struggling offensive line. But can they tackle these backs in space? Can they get into the backfield? Because those backs will make you pay even if the offensive line is struggling. Deshaun Jameson, B.J. Foster, a very veteran secondary. Haven't played very great. Teams have been highly efficient against this zone, completing 74% of their passes against Texas. That's a pretty absurd mark. Again, with the pass rush not being there, this isn't a defense that I think is going to be able to step up and slow down this offense, even if it's a struggling one. Another guy like Anthony Cook, these guys are all going to have to step up in the secondary and just be better, make better plays. They've been giving up a lot of big plays. They're not making any either. They only have a handful of interceptions on the year, only 3. And again, that zone's been really hurting them. They just need to get a better pass rush in this game, try to make Rattler force mistakes, because he's kind of been doing that on his own this year. And if you can put pressure on him, gives guys like Foster and Josh Thompson, whoever, to make plays on the ball. These guys have really good ball skills. I like what they have in the secondary, but for the most part, this defense, I feel like they're kind of outmatched here in terms of speed and skill. Looking at team comparisons, who has the edge? Starting with quarterback Spencer Rattler, I'll give it to him. I think these are 2 very talented quarterbacks. Rattler, though, despite his mistakes, he's been really good at times too. Very efficient. You know what the talent he has, what he brings to the table, what he's capable of. If you give him time and you give his receiver some space, he's going to tear you apart. I think this is a game where he really starts to come into his own. I think he's going to have a big day. Looking at running backs, I'm going to give it to Texas. Bijan Robinson, my favorite back in college football to watch. Both running back rooms are very deep, though. Johnson, Roschon Johnson and Robinson, they're a big reason why those guys – they are the reason those guys run for so many yards a game. Eric Gray and Kennedy Brooks, they're incredibly talented too, regardless of the offensive line. That's a very talented bunch of backs on both sides of the ball. Pass catchers, Oklahoma, this is my second – I think this is my first or second ranked unit, my number 2 unit coming into the year. Incredibly deep. Mario Williams is having a much bigger impact than I thought he would due to the injury of Theo Weiss. He's really had to step up. All around great. They've been great at distributing the ball. No one's really stood out phenomenally yet. Marvin Mims is still a burner, as is Mike Woods. Jason Hazelwood has great ball skills. Just all around. These guys are incredibly deep. You'll even see Drake Stoops get involved, and Austin Stogner too. These guys are just very deep. And Jeremiah Hall even, this is a very good receiving core for Oklahoma. Looking at the offensive lines, it's kind of even, but I'm going to give it the slight edge to Texas because they've been able to get a great push up front running the ball. It hasn't been all the running backs. You still have to have a good push. They've been doing that. Both have been very good in pass protection. Oklahoma has been pretty solid in pass protection themselves. So I'm going to give the edge to Texas just a little bit. But it's been kind of even though both have had their ups and downs early on in the year. It's a very young unit for Texas too. Two freshmen on that offensive line. Jake Majors at center is one of them. It's always difficult with a veteran or a young center. Derek Kurtzetter, probably the best lineman in this game at left guard. He's really good for Texas. So I'll give this slight edge to the Longhorns. The defensive line, I just talked about. I really think this defensive line for Oklahoma is incredibly active. Jalen Redmond, Isaiah Thomas, Nick Coe, and then you have Nick Benito coming off the edge. Perry and Winfrey as well at defensive tackle. These guys have great depth. They're incredible. I think they're very impressed with what they have. Oklahoma is probably the best defensive front in college football. If not the best, it's certainly up there. They're very tough to run the ball against. They get good penetration, go to get into the passer. So I'm going to give it to Oklahoma. Looking at linebackers, I'm going to give the edge to Texas. If those 2 linebackers they have, and Luke Brockmeyer, DeMarvion Overshawn, and their 4-2-5 unit. Brockmeyer's been really impressive this year. He's all over the field making plays. I guess there was a play against TCU where he, kind of failed to wrap up, and they ended up scoring a touchdown on. Still going through some of those struggles early on in the season. So he hasn't been great, but he hasn't been bad. I think he's been a very good asset for this Texas defense. DeMarvion Overshawn, he's a phenomenal playmaker. What he can do in coverage, just as an overall playmaker as well. Very good ball player like Overshawn, as their leading tackler too, as is Brockmeyer. Those guys are both far and away the leading tacklers. Monumental for this unit. So I'm going to give Texas the edge there. And I'm going to give them the edge in the secondary. Nothing but veterans. I riddled them off earlier. Guys like, 4 seniors. Deshaun Jameson, B.J. Foster, Josh Thompson, Anthony Cook. Incredibly. They haven't been great, but neither is Oklahoma's. Oklahoma's defensive success has really been predicated off the front 7, what they've been able to do. Can't really say the same for Texas. Oklahoma's secondary all around, they have been a little bit better. They're not giving up as many big plays as the Longhorns, but last week was not very good whatsoever. So it's kind of a toss-up really in the secondary. I'm going to give it to Texas, though, with the veteran presence, also the physicality as well. Looking at my keys to the game and prediction, for Oklahoma, just be good at penetrating with your front 7. Mainly with that offensive line I keep praising. You have to be instrumental in trying to put the ball in Casey Thompson's hands to make plays downfield. Do not let B.J. Robinson, Roschon Johnson, don't let that run game get going and tear you up. It's going to be a long day if that happens because the burners Texas has, the play-action game, it's going to be too smooth if this running game gets going. So just your defensive line has to be incredibly active, generate great penetration. For Texas, just don't get beat deep. This year they've actually had, some struggles in the back end of their secondary, giving up big plays. Force Oklahoma to drive downfield. They've not been doing that with great success this year. The Kansas State game was a step in the right direction. But just don't get beat deep. Just keep everything in front of you. Have Oklahoma go on those long drives. Because right now they haven't really proven they're capable of doing that on a consistent basis. Prediction for the game, I'm going to take Oklahoma 27-24. I think we're going to see a very close back and forth game. Texas will be the trendy pick in this one. And I understand why. But I think this defensive line is going to show up. I think they're going to play much better. I think they're going to slow this running game down because that's the bread and butter for Texas. I wouldn't be shocked if this is the game. I think this is the game where Spencer Rattler is going to break out. I think he's going to have a big game, a big day. I don't see anyone getting blown out, though. But we're finally going to learn about Oklahoma, though, and this great rivalry that's always close. I'm going to go with the Sooners by a handful of points. It's kind of a toss-up, though. If the Sooners get kind of gashed up in the ground game, though, they will probably lose this game. That's going to wrap everything up for today's episode. Make sure you like, subscribe. See you next time.